Hey, we're trying a bit of a different format, as you can probably tell a little bit, but you're going to see more of that here in a second. Now, this different format, if you like it, drop a comment down below or hit that like button. And if you don't, that's okay too. Let us know that below as well. We're trying some different things, but we hope that it's helpful, particularly in the lesson that we're looking at today of God the Restorer. And so we're going to talk about it specifically through the book of Ruth. Now, Ruth is one of my favorite books. It takes place during the time of the Judges, and we know that the time of the Judges was just such a tumultuous time for the nation of Israel. There was so much sin, there was so much chaos, there was so much suffering. And why? Because people were doing what was right in their own eyes. But in the midst of all that, there's this bright spot, and that's where the book of Ruth comes in. So today, let's dig a little bit deeper into the book of Ruth as we talk about God the Restorer. So let's read together the first 3 verses. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the name of his 2 sons were Machlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. Okay, so we have this family that's together, and the father dies. Naomi is left with her 2 sons. Now, this word here for sons is our standard word for sons in the Old Testament, and that's ben. This is the normal word that was used in the Old Testament for sons. But let's keep reading a little bit. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Machlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Okay, now this is where things, I think, start to get pretty interesting, because this is not our standard word for sons like we saw back in verse 3. This is a different word. It's the word Yeled, which can carry the idea of like a young child. And so my question is Naomi, as it's talking about the passing of her sons, is this looking at it more from the perspective of a parent? That intimacy that a parent has with their child, regardless of their age, right? Because as parents, they're always going to be our babies. They're always going to be our children, right? No matter how old they get. And so I wonder if in verse 3, if we're looking at just sons in general, but when we're talking about the passing here, I wonder if this is looking at it more from a mother's perspective. Well, we go a little bit further, and we know that Naomi means pleasant. But as she goes into Bethlehem, she asks for people to call her Marah, which means bitter, because now she feels empty. We start to reflect on what she's lost. She's lost her husband. She's lost her 2 sons. She's lost a daughter-in-law who's chosen to not go back with her. And against her wishes, she has another daughter-in-law who's decided to come with her. But really, she feels empty. She feels like she's lost everything. And so where does she go? She goes back to Bethlehem, the house of bread. So, over the course of this book, we see Ruth showing an incredible amount of love, an incredible amount of care and compassion to Naomi. And so what I want to do is I want to look at the bookends. We looked at the beginning, but now I want to look at the end of Ruth. Because it ends on a very happy note. Again, this takes place during the time of the judges, which is just tumultuous and full of sin and suffering and chaos. But then we get to the end of Ruth. The beginning, we started with bitterness and loss. But here, what do we see? So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. There's our word ben, a standard word for son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel." So Ruth and Boaz had the child, but the women were talking to Naomi about how blessed she is now. "He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And where I really want to focus now is that word for child. That word for child is not the standard ben, but instead it's that word that we talked about earlier, Yelaid. And so now we see this woman, Naomi, who loses the husband, the sons, the daughter-in-law. But now, through Ruth's compassion and care and the blessings of the Lord, Naomi, who wanted to be called bitter, now feels fulfilled again. She feels more complete. She feels restored. So, from this restoring comes a great opportunity to look at restoration on a bigger picture, on a bigger level. Look at verse 17. "And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, 'A son has been born to Naomi.' They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David." So we see on an individual level this woman being restored. We see then hope in David on a national level, a restoration of Israel. During its time of tumultuousness and suffering and chaos comes David, the future king, who is going to help bring people back to God. And you know who comes from David? Jesus Christ, born in Bethlehem, born in the lineage of David, who came to restore us back to God so that we might be called his children. Our God is a God of restoration. And so wherever you are today, you don't have to feel bitter. You don't have to feel empty. You don't have to feel incomplete in any way, because God can restore us. We might deal with physical hardships here on earth, but God is a God of restoration. And while we might not have everything restored to us here on earth, and while we might feel those hardships and that pain and that suffering, know that God cares. And he is a God of restoration, whether it's in this life or in the one to come. May God bless you as we look at this text and know that our God restores.